You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
This is the Daniel Monday Night Community Show on demand through YouTube. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to us through this method. If you'd like to keep up to date with when I add new interviews, then subscribe to this channel. So we are out and about, and we're down at Sheppey Horticultural Society's allotment plots. We're going to be talking to our regular visitor, Dave. Dave, it's always good to speak to you, and it's one of the things I've come to look forward to each year is coming down to the plots.
That's very kind of you to say so, actually. It's been delightful to have you here again, because you always seem to bring the sunshine with you, Daniel, which is an added bonus when you're on allotmenteering, certainly on the weekends, when most people are free from work and they'll be coming down. It's a bit quiet at the moment because it's still quite early. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. But during the morning you will see many more people. Sorry, I have to say that very quickly. Many more people arriving, and then the whole social business on Sunday morning, allotmenteering and socialising actually starts to take place. So delighted to have you here again.
Well, one of the things I was going to say that's nice to see today is I've been down here a lot more as we've been doing our art transmission project with Kate and you, and everything's looking so green and growing, and there's some asparagus behind you that just looks like a lovely sort of fern shape. It's just looking really sort of green and growing at the moment.
It's lush, isn't it? When you're looking around, we were walking up to the plot this morning, and suddenly you saw it, everything is actually green. And that's something we actually said to Kate and Simon, of course, the photographer, who we've invited back to take photographs, seasonal photographs, because he would have seen it earlier in the year when things were really just pushing through the ground. Here, of course, as you've just mentioned, the asparagus is about, 5 or 6 feet high, which is delightful, but unfortunately you can't eat it. Asparagus has such a short season that we now need to let that go to replenish itself for next season, for next year. That actually is about 3, getting on towards 4 years old. So I understand that you've got some asparagus as well, which is very early in its infancy stage.
Yeah, very, very small at the moment.
I would suggest you can't eat it at the moment. Let it grow for a couple of years, certainly, and just take a few of the spears so that it will build up the resources, and they'll be all the better for it. Certainly asparagus, where you're concerned.
I was going to say, it probably sounds strange. One of the reasons I grew it was actually, although it's nice to eat it, I just have seen it before when it grows like this up to the fern. I just quite like the idea of that actually growing as a plant in itself in the garden.
It's very, very, very ornamental, and in fact, funnily enough, it's good for bees as well. I've actually seen bumblebees working in it. The flower is minuscule. It's that little yellow dot that you can just about see, but the bumblebees are actually they go for it, and it's quite remarkable to see them. They're often heavier than the frond itself, and they will bend it over, but it just doesn't stop them. So yeah, if it helps the bees as well, fine, great. But it's great eating.
How else are things going on the plot? What's been doing well this year?
Just about, it swings and roundabouts with the plot actually this year. As you remember, we had an awful lot of rain very early in the year, which meant that the ground got really compacted and got very, very hard indeed. It was a real struggle, and just about everybody was saying the same thing. It's an awful struggle to actually either get the rotavating machines or to even dig it on occasions. So I dug this particular plot of mine, I dug it late last year, expecting the frost to break up the ground for me, but of course we didn't get the frost on the island. So unfortunately it had to be dug again this year, and of course that's quite taxing. Having to do it twice is a bit of an onerous task, if you know what I mean, but it benefits. So yes, as you say, it goes back to this lushness. You can actually see an awful lot of green. A lot of people have commented on it, that the rain that we had earlier has actually benefited us later in the year, albeit it's been harder work to get into the ground to dig up, or to dig it over in effect. But yeah, it works. It has been working, and it's working pretty hard, the ground now. As you can see all around you, lots and lots of stuff. My wife has just picked the red currants. In front of you there's a red gooseberry. There'll be fennel coming through in those pots just behind you, and then peppers. First time I've actually tried peppers out in the open air rather than in the greenhouse. They seem to have survived, but then we've been lucky recently with lots of sunshine. We could do with some rain. I know the rain has been sort of pretty spasmodic around. on Thursday when we were with the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway,
Yep.
it rained on the way back, and yet when I got to home, no rain at all. This just shows you that that's the island weather pattern again. So it swings and roundabouts at the moment.
We are at the moment talking to Dave Helm. We're out and about at the Sheppey Horticultural Society's allotment plots this morning. What we're going to do now is we're going to just walk along Dave's plot and just have a little look at how things are going. But I've started off by this lovely tree, so I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about it.
It's actually a Kentish cob. I inherited it when I took over the plot some 7 years ago, something like that. It's pretty prolific, actually. It wasn't so good last year, but as you can see, the nuts are coming back this year. And they're still pretty green, they're still in the green. So I'm looking forward to putting those on the Christmas table. But they're better eaten in the green, actually, at around August, September time. They're much softer, they're much sweeter, and you can actually, if you actually touch that down, you'll see that you can actually push it in. That one there.
Oh, yeah.
So, in effect, the nuts that you get from the Christmas shops are, let's say, older, if you know what I mean. But so that they're much sweeter, much nicer, and much more nutritious, actually. Oh, and the other good thing is if you're out and about, you can crack them with your teeth and you're not going to pay a visit to the dentist as well, because the whole husk is actually much sweeter indeed. Quite a few people are starting to grow these again now. You often see them, obviously, in lining roadsides and what have you. It's very difficult sometimes to stop and actually start picking nuts, especially if a police officer comes along and says, "Excuse me, sir, what exactly are you doing?" "I'm picking nuts, officer." So, yeah, I inherited this particular tree. It needs some care and attention because it's still quite overgrown, actually, so I need to look after it.
That's what I was going to ask. Does it need much work to keep it going?
That hasn't been touched apart from just pruning the edges, and certainly where it gets into the eye line of people. You know, they're not. Some people are taller than me, so you need to look out for it. But it's a case of actually reading up on the books and seeing which way. You could, of course, at that time start to lose the nuts because it will have to replenish itself. But no, it's something I inherited. I'm pretty proud of it. It's the only one actually on the site here at Richmond Street, and I often say, "Do you fancy some nuts?" Actually, you see people scrumping around for them on the floor. So yeah, so come back in the autumn, and you're welcome to some in the green cob nuts. But it's a true Kentish cob nut, and it's been there for, as you can see, it's about 20 odd feet high.
It's a nice shape because the green comes all the way down, so it's almost a bush-like as well as a tree. Yeah,
it needs pruning at eye line for obvious reasons, because there are pathways by the side of it. But it also affords some shade as well when some of the plants don't need sunshine all day long. Yeah. And especially when I'm sort of sitting down on the seat as well, we can actually go round the edge of the bush. But what it does, it gives height. Yeah. And I would suggest that, lots of people would think it stays no bigger than that, about 20 feet, and it's well worth it because the produce you can get from it, come Christmas time or come autumn time, great.
Yeah.
And you can see the nuts there.
Lovely sort of shape to the nuts because it's almost there, like a leaf capture almost.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable actually that, and they come in 2s and 3s. The other good thing is you can shake the tree, right? And when they're ready, they will drop off. You don't have to go climb it.
That's good.
Peppers. First time I'm growing them outside, actually, just to see chili peppers. Or not chili peppers, sweet peppers. There is actually one there with a sweet pepper on, but it's the first time. They need warmth and they'll need some sunshine.
I noticed there's a netting over them, so I assume you have to keep them protected.
Well, you can listen to something that Kate actually said in her piece, if you remember. It was something that was remarked upon, the noise that the birds make. The amount of birds that we actually get here. They're probably on the rooftops looking, especially pigeons. Yeah. They're on the rooftops looking, so we have to protect what we're actually growing. Specifically, we're coming along to the brassicas, the cabbages and things like that here. Keeping out of the line of the bees, which aren't too active this morning. It's still a little bit cold for them, so they will actually wake up if the weather gets warmer. But they don't bother us and we don't bother them, and they do everything. And they're good for all allotmenteers because bees will fly far and wide foraging. And we get a six-fold increase. That's the theory anyway.
Yeah.
We get a six-fold increase on our produce. So coming up, this is something which was construed last year as something of a superfood, which is Swiss chard, which is a very good doer. Now, you can see the attraction for sticking that in a flower garden as well.
Yeah, it looks nice.
And you can eat it. It's called Bright Lights, and it's Swiss chard. It's a good doer. You can eat the leaves, which look a little bit like beetroot leaves.
Yeah.
You can eat the leaves. You can put it in salad, chop it up. The young leaves, you can actually put those in salad without actually cutting. So it works as a salad vegetable, as a cooked vegetable, and the stems can be actually steamed.
Ah.
And that's how we eat them with some sauce and what have you.
They've got lovely sort of a pinky red stem.
Well, what's good about Bright Lights is that you can actually see that there are yellow stems, that's why it's called Bright Lights, and it's Swiss chard,
Right.
and it's a biennial. So it will actually last you 2 years. So it's a good doer, and economically, it's very good.
So do you have to sort of just cut it back and protect it from the frost?
It's as hard as nails, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It really is. This, unfortunately, because of the sunshine and the warmth we're actually having, is bolted just a bit. But you can still eat the leaves, you can still eat the stems. So you can see, over the year, even if it's in a flower garden, in an ordinary flower garden, it's a vegetable which is an extremely good doer, but it looks attractive as well. It attracts bees, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the stems, and it will come back next year, hard as nails. These are climbing French beans. I prefer them rather because I don't have to bend over to pick them up. As you can see, they're about 5 feet high on a trellis, and you can see the beans are already coming from at the bottom there. This is a preference of mine, that I go for dwarf French beans, because you could, in effect, I get a little bit tired of runner beans. I shouldn't perhaps say that, but it's one of my personal preferences, obviously. So I actually grow those. Red cabbage, onions, shallots, which haven't been too bad this year. There's always the problem with allotments that you're going to get with your onions and your shallots. You will get something called white rot.
Right.
There's no known cure for it, unfortunately, other than leaving onions out of that particular bed for a very long period of time, which runs into quite a few years. So you can see sometimes allotmenteers are hard pushed.
Yep.
Where am I going to put the onions next year? Because there are some superb onions grown here. These will come on later in the year. Red cabbages, which I take particular pride in because there's nothing like a tightly knit red cabbage. Plus the fact, it's another vegetable that you can actually put into a flower garden.
Well, I was just about to say that, actually. It's a lovely sort of almost greeny, purpley leaf. It's a lovely colour in its own right.
And that's right. I'm just going out to pick something in the garden, and I've picked the cabbage, which is fine. And plus the fact, of course, you can repeat them as well. There are cabbages which will go through the winter, so you're actually storing up food for yourself, albeit in the garden. Here on the allotment, of course, it's de rigueur to grow brassicas and cabbages. So from there we've got broccoli, green cabbage, red cabbage, all in the same place. But again, it's heavily netted, because the cabbage white butterflies are just starting to wing up, and they are looking for somewhere to place their eggs. So I would recommend that if you are growing cabbages and brassicas, certainly look underneath the leaf and look for the eggs, because it's about this time that the cabbage white butterfly will be around.
So it's keeping a close eye on things.
Yeah, and obviously caterpillars, those kinds of things. This year, albeit you're supposed to be relaxing in the garden, relaxing to a point, because you've also got to be vigilant about the pests and the other things that are actually coming along. Not too many ladybirds this year, unfortunately. So I've only seen 3 or 4.
No, I haven't seen many thinking about it.
Hopefully there will come in later when the aphid is about. That's something else you need to keep a lookout for if you're growing beans and this kind of thing. That the aphid will becoming prevalent at the moment. In fact, over there I had broad beans, and they're a good marker because they come to fruition much earlier in the year.
Yeah.
They're a very good marker for black fly green fly. When you see them on that, you know that you're going to get them somewhere else. So literally what we did was pick the beans over a very, very short period of time. It was a very good crop because they're an early doer anyway. But a good marker for black fly. Peas.
Right.
Not doing too well at the moment. Again, beloved of mice. We came along one day last week to find that all the peas had been rooted up. So we had to reroot and put them back down again. There are various ways that you can protect them, not least by netting. That's not heavily netted this year because I put it this way, it becomes cumbersome in that sense.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do it this particular way this year. We'll let them grow to about 3 and a bit feet high, and then hopefully we will start picking peas. They never see home. They never see the inside of a saucepan, the peas, because they're a great source of food when you're sitting on allotment. That's the beauty of this kind of thing. That, hold on a minute, I can actually eat this and I don't have to take it home. It seems like a total misnomer. It seems strange to actually bring sandwiches or bring a salad vegetable in a sandwich to a plot when you know you're growing it on the plot. It seems weird. Tomatoes, they are just newly gone in. I put my tomatoes in a bit later, actually. Certain typical type of varieties. Again, if people are growing tomatoes, and it's the most common thing which is actually grown by British gardeners and British horticulturalists, you need to be aware of the possibility of blight.
Yeah.
We have heard some stories that there were Kentish farmers who have already suffered from blight with their early potatoes. So again, you need to be very aware of that and take appropriate measures, either by covering them over or putting something around them to protect them, because unfortunately it's all wind blown. It's wind borne.
I noticed actually you've got like a pot submerged next to all of them. Is that to do with getting water to the roots?
I've mentioned this before, actually. Sorry, I sound stuttering this morning. I do apologise for the stuttering. Because you never water the plant itself because of the problems that you might encounter with blight.
Right.
Because it is airborne.
Right.
And it just loves damp and humid conditions. So the drier you can keep the actual plant, the better. So that's the reason for the pots right next door. I've grown them in the pots.
Yeah.
Somewhere to store them for the next couple of months, actually, until such time as you hopefully take in lots of tomatoes. But you're also able to feed the roots as well by putting water as well as actually feeding it with good garden stuff.
Yeah. I suppose it also makes sure the water isn't wasted. It's getting to the roots.
Yeah, it's getting to the roots directly. And in fact, it takes a little bit more time, but I would suggest if people are growing tomatoes, never ever use a hose, quite frankly. Do not broadcast it, your water, because it could be dangerous. You could end up with no tomatoes. And quite frankly, just a bit of experience, I went away on holiday last year. We had a superb display of tomatoes before we went, but they were just turning red. We got back a week later to find that the haulms were dead, everything was dead, and everything was totally blighted. And apparently, but other fellow allotmenteers are telling me that it happened over a weekend.
Yeah, so
simply because the humidity, it was very, very fast. You probably saw this or encountered it yourself, perhaps.
Yeah.
But that's the reason for it. I never ever actually water the plant. Stick the fertiliser into the pot, because then it also gets straight to the root, whether it's a fluid or liquid or whether it's actually hard grain or something like that. It's better to actually just... plus the fact that the pots, in fact, are working for a bit longer as well, because it's straight out of the pot, straight into the ground, and the pot goes next door to it. But just one other thing, if people are still growing tomatoes, you can still get them in the shops and what have you.
Yeah.
Is bury it quite deep. Bury it at least up to the seed leaf level. These are the first two leaves that actually appear.
Yeah.
Bury them deep, because they don't like particularly to rock. Plus the fact, I've probably mentioned this before, but tomatoes have what's known as adventitious roots. i.e. you get the knobbly bits on the side of the stem.
Right.
They will become roots themselves, and it will help to stabilise the plant.
Oh, interesting.
As you can see, we've been digging the early potatoes already. This year we decided to do it slightly differently. It's literally dig up as we require potatoes, or it means more trips to the plot, but at least the potatoes are still growing rather than digging up the whole of first early. So there's 4 rows of first earlies, 4 rows of second early, and then 3 rows of main crop potatoes. And again, you'll need to make absolutely sure that the blight don't get to them. So that's the early sign. Because it's a broader leaf perhaps than a tomato, you can detect the appearance of blight. So far we've been blessed with nice, good, hot Sheppey weather and Sheppey sun, and it's stood us in good stead so far. But again, I repeat the warning that it's well worth looking on the websites to see which way the wind is blowing, and which way the blight is actually probably coming, which direction it's actually coming in.
I was going to say, I assume when you sort of talk about earlies and later ones, that means you've planted them at different stages, so they're now coming ready at different stages.
And hopefully the main crop potatoes will be a much larger, because they will have been in the ground for much longer.
Right.
So we'll dig those in the autumn. These are the earlies. They're the new potatoes, the ones that you don't need to peel. You can just stick them straight into a saucepan. 5 minutes later, they are absolutely delicious. They're even better cold, actually. So yes, there's a difference of about 3 to 4 weeks between planting the first earlies. Traditionally, the first earlies are planted around Easter time or a little bit earlier, and then a couple of weeks later the second earlies, and then a couple of weeks, and it provides you with a continuum of potatoes throughout the season. We've actually cut down on the potatoes that we actually grew. Years ago, everybody planted loads and loads and loads of potatoes. Quite frankly, 2 people can't eat that many potatoes, so we've actually cut the number that we actually grow, because we've provided the space for other things, which we will also eat, like the Swiss chard, like the beans, the sweet corn, that kind of thing over there. So, finally on the top bed, apart from the fruit, which provides me with a very useful screen of tayberries, raspberries and a blackberry, we have squashes and courgettes, growing something different in the middle this year. It's about 5 feet long already, and you can see that there's quite a small squash that hopefully will grow to about 4 or 5 times the size, called a spaghetti squash. Cut the inside open, it looks like strands of spaghetti inside. It's the first time I've actually grown one, so it'll be an interesting exercise to see how to cook it, or rather for my wife to see how to cook it. But right in front of us we have, and you can see they're just starting to trail. These are the butternut squashes. Again, very, very good doers, and eventually between them they will cover this entire plot, which is about 12 feet wide by about 30 feet long. They will cover everything, masking out the weeds so I don't have to weed until of course I take them up later in the year and you've discovered all the weeds are just waiting to come up again. So this time of the year it's important. You can see I've hoed this particular bed about 3 or 4 times already, but the weeds are starting to come back. So again, it's very important that you keep the weeds down. Having said it's a good relaxing time in the garden, it's also a vigilant time again, or vigilance time, to make sure that the weeds don't come back. So I will hoe these off later in the day. But you can see the bright yellow flowers. I
was going to say, lovely flowers.
Again, they're good doers. You can actually eat the flowers.
Right.
They are perfectly edible. Put into batter, fried very, very quickly, or in a frying pan very quickly, and they are very, very tasty indeed. But the good thing is, if you want to walk up to them. As you can see, they're starting to come already. Now that will give that a couple of days over there as well. So we grow a good variety, round ones, because they tend not to spread so much. And the other ones, which will spread absolutely everywhere, they will go their own way. You'll see that we've actually pegged them to try to put them into the positions or the direction that we want them to go.
Right, yeah.
They have a mind of their own, Daniel.
I was going to say, it must be difficult to encourage a plant to grow the way you want it to.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other good thing, actually, is the CDs. We actually put CDs underneath the fruits themselves to keep them off the ground. So if it does rain, there's less risk of it actually rotting underneath on the ground. So a very good use of CDs. And as I've said many times, allotmenteers are absolutely wonderful at saving things.
Yeah.
I can use that for some other reason. I have a perfect stock of CDs, but I'm not saying which artists I no longer listen to. So I have a perfect stock of CDs, or a big stock of them, which will go underneath the squashes when eventually we get them. Again, it keeps them off the ground.
Yeah.
It's just a make-do kind of thing that allotmenteers are famous at actually doing. Very often somebody will come up and say, it's not a case of that you don't want to do it like that, but somebody next door has got a great idea.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely no reason why you can't sort of grab that idea and say, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Other people will come up and say, what are you doing on this particular occasion? We're doing something. Great, I'll try that. Over there, for instance, on a shed, he's got guttering attached to the side of his shed, and he's growing small lettuces in it. Oh. They're not even attached to the ground. They are actually just in the guttering. Again, it's where can I find the space to put it? And it's the same in gardens. If you think about it, it doesn't all have to be evenly spaced.
No.
My garden is totally overgrown. Yesterday I spent a good few hours just cutting things back because of the lushness that we've actually got, and it's something we mentioned a short while ago, just how lush it has actually become, and that was something which was noticeable to Kate as well, and to Simon particularly. That he said it was just suddenly greening up, and you've said it this morning.
It just looks so green. It's amazing how much difference the rain can make to. And I've noticed this: no matter how much you kind of care and try and water the plants, if you get a couple of weeks of rain or a period of rain, it's completely different to when you're trying to water it yourself. It just grows.
Yeah, you just can't. You can't actually, compete with the rain, depending on how long it's actually raining. But it's a strange island because on Thursday night it was raining quite heavily in the Sittingbourne area, and when I drove back onto Sheppey, and yet strange enough at the other end of the island it was pretty dry. So this island has its own weather system, so you need to be aware of that. But quite frankly, you can't compete, except of course with the tomatoes, where you're deliberately watering the root, because that's where the tomato needs it instantly. So what I will do later today is actually water all of those tomatoes. They've not been watered. You must be consistent with tomatoes as well. There's no point in sort of watering and then leaving it. So, I've given that so many pints. You've actually got to be consistent with it, because what you want is consistent growth, because tomatoes unfortunately suffer from a number of ailments if, for instance, you're not careful on how you water them. Blossom end rot, that all quite weird and wonderful names that these things have actually got. Again, we have a relaxed atmosphere here.
Kind of a learning process for everyone. By experimenting, you're finding new ways all the time, I suppose. Absolutely right. Yeah, some people leave it severely alone and do it organically, as organically as they possibly can. Others actually smother it with insecticides. As long as the wind's not blowing too hard, and as long as next door neighbour doesn't mind so much, then fine. We adopt a relaxed atmosphere about it and a relaxed attitude towards it, actually, because in the end it's what you're going to eat. What we do, we'll take a little break, and then we'll continue talking to Dave. So we are continuing to talk to Dave. We've just been walking along his plot and going through what he's growing at the moment. We've come to the end, but we've got they almost look like raspberries, but I don't think they are
They're actually tayberries, and I inherited them on the plot when I first took it over. Moved them from about 40 odd feet away up to this particular end, because they form a very useful windbreak or wind barrier. But they're also an extremely good doer. As you can see, we've just been scoffing them while the music's been playing. Yeah, nice and, nice I don't know what your opinion is of tayberries, but I rather like them.
No, they are really, really nice. And what's interesting, you've left them so they've gone quite dark, and sometimes with our raspberries at home, I'm always worried and picking them up sometimes a bit too early because I think they're going to go rotten or they're going to get sort of pecked. Actually, leaving them like that, they are sweeter. I think.
It's a fine point actually.
Yeah.
At what point do I actually take them? So yes, I've been harvesting them for about a week or so. The darker the colour, certainly where Taberries are concerned, the darker the colour, the better. So the blackbird and I have actually been picking them right left and centre. It's quite remarkable. But the other good thing is that things like this are extremely good for bees. You probably noticed when you were mentioning that the raspberries are very good this year.
Yeah, there's been bees all around
them. They absolutely love this soft fruit. And I thought at one point I wasn't really going to get anything this year. But this year, again, because of the bees which are on the plot, plus the bumblebees, of course, and the wild bees coming along, they go absolutely for this. So, again, it's another fruit which will help the bee population. Plus the fact, of course, you get extra pollination. Somebody actually estimated the pollination rate goes up by about 6-fold, which is quite remarkable. And I hope you found the berries were okay for you. They were sweet enough.
No, they were nice actually.
It's a very good do it. I just leave this severely alone. It's about 3.5 feet high. If I let it, it could actually grow to about 8 feet, but I actually cut it back and prune it. And that's the simplest thing. This year's branches will get cut back,
right?
But already next year's are in, so you can see where not to cut.
Yeah, right.
And leave those on, and they will actually grow for next year. Tie them in, and away you go. It's almost like its own wild hedgerow. And I reap the profits. Sorry, the blackbird and I reap the profits. He's probably sitting up on one of the roofs watching me at this particular moment. So you can see there's a wide range of things that people actually grow. Carrots, tomatoes, onions, runner beans, peas, strawberries. These are potatoes up there as well. Lots of people will obviously grow potatoes because it's a basic food stuff. So lots of allotmenteers will grow the basics, if you know what I mean. But there's always room for, not so much for improvement, but experiment. For instance, a couple of years ago, the squashes wouldn't perhaps have been seen on an allotment, certainly not the butternut squashes. Yeah. And you noticed the price of them recently in the shops?
Yeah.
They're very expensive. So much so that my wife sort of tugs me when we go around the shop for the other stuff that we need and says, look at the price of that, you know. So it works that way as well. Economically, it's quite a sound proposition having an allotment. Having a garden is a sound proposition, I think, actually.
Well, one of the things this year, and it's certainly been something I've enjoyed, is we've been working with you as part of our project Arts Transmission. Our sound artist has been visiting, must be over the last sort of 3 months or so.
Something like that, I think it was, isn't it? Yeah. We first met Kate when she was really sort of muffled up and with a hat, big wind cheaters, all kinds of weird and wonderful clothing, which we were all wearing at that particular moment. And everybody was at that point wondering, what's the season going to be like this year? But of course it turned out much, much better. And when I gave keys to Kate and said, there you are, get on with it, she had carte blanche, freedom to roam, which we liked because, as I said, we are a relaxed society. And people, I think, relaxed to her. We were very pleased to be taking part in that particular project, which is coming to fruition. I can't wait to hear the three that she's put together over the next 3 weeks, actually.
Well, no, it's certainly been nice to catch up with you at the point we're airing Kate's pieces. And I think one of the things I didn't really think about was not only working with Kate and you to capture these sounds, but we've actually been lucky enough to see things grow. Because you said we come in the winter and everything was at the start and things were being dug over, and now to come back and over that time and see everything growing, it's almost like I've been able to see the process in a way I don't normally see when I visit. That's
a point. Yes, it's delightful to have you back. As I say, it's a different season, so much so that we've invited the photographer Simon back to have a look at the seasonality, and I think he was quite taken with that. So I think he will take us up on that. But no, we were very pleased, and Kate was, as I say, we gave her some keys and said, we have 2 sites, they're different, go speak to anybody you like. And then people relaxed when they were in front of her. It's always difficult when somebody sticks a microphone and you're not used to it. What do I say now? I'm having difficulty this morning. So But when people are starting to relax, you get more out of them. And quite remarkable, and the sounds which we don't necessarily hear or don't necessarily listen out for, which were being recorded, certainly on the first piece, which I've had the privilege of actually seeing. I can say this, can I?
Yes,
Is it okay to say?
Fine.
You know, the sounds were quite remarkable. The sounds of birds and what have you. I can hear, but suddenly I'm starting to think about the bird sounds, which I'm now hearing. Which something, fair enough. As I said to you, the blackbird and I enjoy the tabourers. He sings, and I notice the blackbird, but there are any number of other birds and noises which you don't necessarily think about because you're part and parcel of them. You're within that particular sound bubble. Separate them out, and they become kind of special. They become almost musical in that sense. I don't want to get too emotional or emotive about it.
But it is nice that Kate's captured those things, and when we sort of early started off in the project, that was perhaps one of the ideas, that by working with the different groups they would even become more aware of things that were already there. And you saying that almost is saying that some of that's been achieved in some ways, I suppose.
When we were listening to the previews back last Thursday, I noticed that about the boxing club as well. It almost became Japanese music, and it became very, very rhythmic. Likewise, the train one, there is a rhythmic sound to it. And then I suddenly thought, how on earth are you going to get the rhythmic sound on an allotment plot? And it works. It worked like that. But she did it slightly differently because we are a different beast, let's say, or different animal. That there was a lot of fade up and fade in and fade out. And it became, how can I say it? Dare I say it? A bit ethereal. It was as though I was hovering.
Yeah.
Because I know the voices of the people that Kate actually recorded. I was hovering over the allotment thinking, I'm seeing allotments in a different light here. I know that sounds very emotional. Obviously, people will make up their own minds. That's how it struck me. That these are noises, sounds which you don't necessarily take notice of. But when they're recorded separately or then put together in a piece, it becomes artistic in a sense, So we were very, very pleased to actually take part, and I have to thank you and BRFM for actually saying, what about the Allotment Society? It's something we would never have thought of. As I said to the preview people on Thursday, when I first mentioned that this thing was about art in sound, there was a lot of querulous looking, thinking, what is he talking about? Hopefully people will get what it was all about, what it actually is about, what the project was about, and it was a different project. If I can make myself understood.
No. Thanks for taking part in it, because I think it's been a real partnership between me, BRFM, and Francis Knight, and our sound artist. So it's I feel it's certainly worked well. So it's good to hear you've enjoyed it.
It helped that Kate was what'd she call herself? A novice allotmenteer.
Yes.
Up in Nottingham. So hopefully she's taken some points, and people will have sort of bent her ear about how to grow this and how to grow that. And that's part of the great allotmenteering project. And long may that actually reign, because I think it's very important for this country and for people in general that they are able to grow their own stuff. Sorry, I'm getting slightly into politics now, but that's not my intention. But the ability to talk to other people about their problems on their earth and what we actually have here, the problems we actually had here, witness the hardness of the ground, the brownness of the ground. When she goodness knows what she must have thought when she first saw this, because as you say, the place looks bare.
Yeah.
Now it looks green and lush, but it will go back to bare again as the vegetables, as the produce becomes available for eating.
So we've just been talking to Dave. We're now going to be talking to some of the other plot holders. We're joined with one at the moment. I was hoping firstly you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, my name's Lawrence Hunt. I live locally in St Helens Road. And I've only been doing this for probably November. I took the plot on, but thoroughly enjoying it at the moment. It's really good.
So what have you started off by growing as someone new?
We started off with the potatoes. We didn't know the plot, so unfortunately it looks as if our potatoes were probably grown there last year, which has affected them slightly on the earlies. But having said that, we've still got quite a good crop out of them. We've got some late potatoes, main crop, and then we've done some beans. We've done the usual radishes and lettuces and spring onions. We've got cabbages growing. We also have broccoli, purple sprouting broccoli, some Brussels and some cauliflowers. We've got onion sets over the other side that are pretty much there now, and also we've done some shallots. We inherited the soft fruit.
Right.
That was already on the plot when we came, so we took over a fairly good plot. It wasn't running wild, so I was quite pleased with that, to be perfectly honest. But ours is only a 10 rod. I think it's a 20 rod, or it's 5 rod and 10 rods. I'm not quite sure how that works. So ours is only half.
Yep.
Whereas Dave's got the full one. As you can see, this is right way back up to there. But no, thoroughly enjoying it. It's been good. We've got a greenhouse if you want to have a quick look.
Yeah, that'd be good if we could come along.
I got the greenhouse from my mum because my mum's unfortunately not able to use it any longer.
Right.
But we're growing. We've brought our seeds on in there, and we've also got the tomatoes growing, cucumber plants and courgettes. I've done a sweet pepper there and a chilli. So it's doing really well. And that's our leeks, which will go in after the early potatoes are finished. Once they've up, we can get them in there.
So quite a lot for your first year then.
Yeah, it's something I do it with my son, James. We do it together. We both get round here as much as we possibly can, but thoroughly enjoying it and enjoying the produce from it as well, which is very good.
Well, thank you very much
That's
for
all right.
telling us a little bit about your plot.
Absolute pleasure.
So this is all part of our regular slot we do with Dave, but we're down on the allotments, and we just moved sites, and we're going to catch up with another two plot holders. Firstly, could you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, I'm Pauline Finlayson.
I'm Malcolm Fiddlerson.
Well, I caught up with you actually because while Kate was spending her time down here doing our arts transmission project, I know she did catch up with you and spoke to you a little bit.
Yeah, she did. It's quite interesting. She was interested in all the sounds and different things about the allotment. We did a little sketch, I believe, on the shed, the sounds of what we got in there, what's important. The noise of the kettle, most important.
Most important, the kettle.
Yeah, she did.
Well, everything seems to be growing well because coming down with Kate since the more winter times, everything was looking very brown and everything dug over. But coming back here today, everything's looking really green. So what's doing really well on your plot?
Well, everything at the moment. The sweet corn, runner beans, peas, plums, potatoes, cabbages, cauliflowers, they're all doing really, really well. But we've only had this plot since the 1st of April. We moved from our old plot at the back because it was 3 months underwater. So we cut our losses, moved here, and this has been marvellous. A lot of hard work moving it all over, but it's paid off.
I was going to say you wouldn't think you'd only moved this year.
Yeah, 1st of April we moved here, and we've worked really, really hard, and we've had some help, my grandson, my sister, but at the moment it's looking real good. We planted a few flowers in between, some sweet peas which are now coming into their own. So we're very, very pleased at the moment.
Well, thank you both of you very much for catching up with us.
That's okay.
You're welcome.
So we are continuing to talk to some of the plot holders at the Sheppey Horticultural Society, and we've moved to Richmond Street. We're next going to talk to another allotment plot holder. We're standing by his plot. Firstly, would you be able to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Jim Waters.
Now, we've caught up with you, one, to talk about your plot, but also as you worked with Kate a bit during our arts transmission project. But first, I was hoping you could just give us a little bit of an introduction into your plot and what you're growing.
Well, I mean, obviously, as you're looking here, I've got medallias, sunflowers, all different kinds of beans, little raised beds of salad stuffs, strawberries, Jerusalem artichokes.
I was going to say the artichokes is the almost massive selection of plants.
I don't actually grow them to eat.
Right.
I just like the structure of them, the sort of architectural structure. And the flowers are absolutely lovely when they come out. There are 2 or 3 people who come over to me, Jim, can I pick some of your artichokes? Because they do actually like eating them. So yeah, we have a swapsies on that.
Do they take a lot of work to grow, or are they something that just sort of grows each year?
I actually planted them as seed last year, and now they're what? You and I are coming on 6 foot?
Yeah.
And how tall are they?
Tall, I think.
Yes, they're 6 foot plus, so they actually were planted as seeds last year.
That's pretty fast. You'd think they were a fair few years old, actually.
Well, they don't normally come on until their 2nd year, but these have just rocketed away, you know.
Now, Kate caught up with you, and I think she was quite interested in sort of sheds and how you get on, I understand.
I mean, we've all got them. I've got tomatoes, peppers, and a few exotics in there. I'm growing castor oil plants and some brugmansia, which other people might know as datura.
Right.
Angel's trumpets. They have huge, great trumpet-like flowers. So I've got them in there as well.
So generally going quite well then?
Yes and no. Germination on the seeds, I've put in rows. If we're walking down a bit, they have this year been absolutely horrendous.
Right.
In the point with the parsnips and the carrots, you can see all the gaps.
Yeah.
The germination has been absolutely horrid this year. I've had to resow. Whether it was the cold, wet weather earlier on, I don't know. But there it is.
Well, thank you very much for catching up with us and telling us a little bit about your plot and how you got on with Kate.
Yeah, well, she liked the frogs, I think.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah, I know Kate. And I think she actually did record some quite good sounds from them.
Well, down the bottom here, the fleet is just behind us.
Yeah.
And, of course, she called up with me down here. And she said, "What's that noise, Jim?" I said, "If you listen, it's the frogs."
Yeah.
And we were talking about it, and I think she actually walked along the fleet at the back there and recorded them, So, yeah. Of course, this is all the other part.
Yeah. It's certainly looking green now, that's for sure.
It's getting better, but earlier on it was very much hard work to get anything started or going. But now, as you see, the pumpkins and the courgettes and all the rest of it are coming along very nicely. And the sweet corn's actually getting up there.
It's a fair old size.
Yeah, so no, the only thing now is where I've cleared these onions, that ground has gone back to granite and you can't even get a fork or a spade in it. So the rain we were promised that we didn't get will have to come along before I'll even try to dig that. Apart from that, yeah, everything's coming along, working quietly on it, basically. It's the only way you can.
Yep. Well, thank you very much.
All right, no problems.
So we are continuing to talk to some of the plot holders this morning. We're joined with another two, so I was hoping firstly the both of you could introduce yourselves to our listeners.
Right, my name's Sharon.
My name's Ian.
Now I understand that you're fairly newcomers to allotment here, so how did you come to get a plot here?
Well, we took the plot on last year in March, and we just looked up on the internet to see if there was any vacant plots, and Ian, I think he wrote a letter in and we was able to get our plot. When we first come down, it was completely overgrown with grass and almost up to our knees, so we've had to start from scratch.
Yeah, there's loads of digging, and there was lots of hard work to start with, but after a few months we got all the potatoes in and everything like that, and we got a huge crop of potatoes, so we were really sort of excited about that because it was our first time, and we've just gone from strength to strength there. We got beans in, we got carrots, onions,
peas, and we're just planting courgettes and butternut squash today. We're quite new to it, we'd never done vegetables before, so it's trial and error for us.
Yeah.
So a real learning process, but it certainly looks like you're doing really well, because you tend to think in your first year, well, you might not achieve much, but looking at this plot, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, we're really pleased with it.
Yeah,
we
are.
Pleased with it.
Really enjoy it. It's really good down here. People are friendly, they're quite helpful as well, so it's a great little place, great to have the shop on site. Really, really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we are continuing to talk to plot holders here at the Sheppey Horticultural Society. We're joined with our next two. I was hoping first you could just introduce yourselves to our listeners.
Ray Jarvis.
And Sue Jarvis.
So how long have you had a plot here?
About 5 years.
So a little while. How are things going with the plot?
Pretty well, really. I mean, it's different years you've got different problems, but on the whole it's quite good, yes. Yeah.
So what are you growing at the moment?
Tomatoes, runner beans, board beans, borlotti beans, courgettes, squash, peas, potatoes, onions, shallots, courgettes, carrots, parsnips, radishes, lettuce, black currants, red currants, raspberries, asparagus, strawberries by the thousand, cauliflowers, cabbages, broccoli.
So a fair old selection.
What a cucumber.
So you've been doing it for 5 years, you say. Is there any sort of vegetables that you really like growing and others that you stopped growing because it just didn't work for you?
Right, well, we've been struggling with swede, but we might have cracked it the last couple of years. We love growing kohlrabi, that grows very well here, and cauliflowers grow really well here.
Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
So we kind of touched upon the artichokes briefly with Jim, but we sort of all stopped here. We're talking about them again. So I thought I'd be nice to capture it for our listeners a bit, Dave.
It's a great plant, actually. It's a very statuesque plant. It's good for allotmenteering, as you can see. It's pretty large in itself. It will probably grow larger than that. At the moment the heads have gone a bit too large. They're about 4 or 5 inches across. That's too big. But when that flowers, you will not believe the colour and the attraction to bees. Yet again, it's something we've been going on about this morning. The attraction to bees is really something else. That will grow and grow. It's a good perennial, it's a good doer. It's an acquired taste, but the actual flower head, when it's much younger, when it's about the size of a large golf ball, let's say, you can steam it and then it's very, very edible. It's the kind of thing that Mediterranean cookery writers go absolutely ape for. It's personal. It's a personal taste.
I was going to say, sort of, talking of you, it sounds like it's one of the things either you like or you hate.
That's the kind of thing. I think everybody we're standing around has actually agreed with me here. It is the kind of thing that you actually go for. There's a lot of plant for what you can actually get from it, but if you catch it just right when it's quite young, the head is quite young, then it's supposed to taste quite exquisite. Actually, it's one of the best tastes that a vegetable or a plant can actually have. But the point about I'm trying to make is it's good for allotments, it's great for eating if you like that kind of thing, but look how wonderful that is as a centre plant in a garden.
Yeah, it's nice as a structural plant.
Purely as a structure, and you're speaking as a sculptor as well, aren't you, or as an artist? But so you would agree that is a very sculptural plant. And as I say, the colour, when it actually comes out, you will see the bees go absolutely, just make sorry to pun, a beeline for it immediately. And I think everybody's nodding in assent, actually. That's the globe artichoke. There is the other plant, which is also called an artichoke, which is totally and utterly different, which grows to about a height of 6 feet or so, which has a bright yellow flower, which forms a wonderful screen of about 6 feet, something like that. The only problem with Jerusalem artichokes, and you dig those up rather like potatoes, they look like malformed potatoes in the earth, is that they're an acquired taste. You probably have heard this, actually. Your stomach and your gut and intestine has to get used to it. The flatulence you would not believe. And I'm sorry to end on such a ribald note, but it's something that everybody actually says, and unless you're actually used to eating Jerusalem artichokes, I would steer well clear of them. They are absolutely delicious, they really are. But you need to acquire an immunity for them.
And you must be among friends.
And among friends. And on that joyous note, I think we'll call these proceedings to an end, Daniel.
Well, Dave, as always, thank you very much for taking me to both sites this time, because it's been good.
As I say, both sites, they're totally different. This one is much larger, much flatter. It's not quite so confined, and that's the nice thing about Sheppey Horticultural Society, is the fact that we run 2 sites which are so distinct from each other, and it's been an absolute pleasure walking around this morning, and the sun is still shining, Daniel. That's Sheppey for you.